Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Reminds and SENDIASS Q&A series. My name is Chloe Nkomo and I'm an advisor with Southampton SENDIASS. So I will be taking you through some of the questions supplied by the lovely Reminds members and providing you with some key information, guidance and legislation to support the answers. So part 3, today we're focusing on school refusal. So if you've missed part 1, which was on SEN support, or part 2, which was on EHCPs, don't worry, you will be able to find them somewhere through either SENDIASS or through Reminds. SENDIASS as well did host a parent training session on school refusal back in the autumn term, where my lovely colleagues Hannah and Jasmine went through everything related to school refusal and anxiety. So a lot of the information I will be sharing today is taken from or similar to that presentation they gave. I will be posting a link to that presentation, which in some areas might go into more detail. So do feel free to check out that presentation as well, just to add a bit more information or just to revisit and increase your knowledge. So before we get into school refusal, I will introduce SENDIASS for those that aren't aware of our service. So if you've been with me throughout this series since part 1, you will be aware of the SENDIASS service and what we do, and you'll probably be a bit bored of these introductions. So I will keep this one brief, I promise, and we will just introduce it very quickly. So again, my slides are delayed, sorry about this, they will catch up soon. So SENDIASS, we are an independent and impartial service who support families in Southampton. So with Southampton SENDIASS, we support Southampton families. There are services in all local authorities, so if you're outside of Southampton, you will have a service of your own. It's just a case of doing a quick internet search to find out who they are, where they are, what their details are. So as I said, I'm an advisor with Southampton SENDIASS, but our family services team at Rose Road also manage the services for Portsmouth and West Berkshire as well. So despite the difference in location between those 3 services, our ethos is the same. So free, confidential, impartial service, providing advice, guidance, support around education, health and social care issues. All staff receive the same training in SEN law, so you can provide factual information about the legislation, which is what I'll be doing throughout this presentation, and about the guidance as well. So we also signpost to local services where necessary. So there's lots we can do, lots of areas we can support, or at least signpost you to. Okay, so there we go. My slides are finally caught up. So there we go. So that will give you a bit more information about what we do and across those areas. And I guess a key point is that we support young people as well. So up to 25 years, we can work with young people directly and like to as well. So if your child is 16 or turning 16 and you would like to support them in increasing their independence by getting their own support and advice and making their own informed decisions, we'll absolutely support that and them. So do get in touch and we can support you with that. So I'll just leave you here with our contact details for Southampton SENDIASS. As you can see, you can get in touch by phone, email, we have a website. We also use Facebook chat if you prefer. So during term time, we also have been running virtual drop-in sessions, which should be continuing into the new term. So just keep an eye out on our Facebook page to see if that will be continuing. And yeah, you can contact us in any of those ways. Okay, so now those introductions are out of the way, let's talk about school refusal. So again, I'll kind of start with a brief introduction of what that is, what that means, what we're looking at. So school refusal, it's a big complex issue and one that as a service we see and support quite a lot, particularly following the pandemic. So let's start by talking about what it is. So first, the term school refusal can be contentious. I know some carers and professionals find the word refusal negative and also kind of instills blame on the child as if they're being defiant, which of course we know is not the case. So it's much more complex than that. It's not an act of defiance. And I just want to clarify that when I use the term school refusal, that's absolutely not what I mean. I know that an organisation named Not Fine in School preferred to promote the term school attendance barriers. And there are other terms kind of flying around that are used, so school phobia, anxiety-based school refusal. There's lots of different terms. I may use different terms interchangeably, but I'm referring to the same thing. So when we talk about school refusal or difficulty accessing school, what are we talking about and what might that look like? So simply put, we are talking about when a child or young person starts missing school due to unclear symptoms or illness. This may also be closely linked to anxiety, so as I discussed, as I mentioned, and can often be called anxiety-based school refusal or school phobia. So lots of terms out there. So there are a whole host of reasons that might trigger these difficulties in school-aged children, including a trauma incident, bullying, academic pressures, undiagnosed SEN or illness, friendship issues or social interaction difficulties, and many, many more. So that's not an exhaustive list by any means. It's just to give a picture of some of the different areas. As I've said, it is a complex issue and can present in a whole host of ways. So there's no kind of one symptom or set of symptoms that define school refusal or school-based anxiety. There's no one clear picture of what that looks like, but it can present in both physical and mental symptoms. So a commonly reported physical symptom from families I have worked with, particularly with younger children who may struggle to articulate their feelings or understand them, is complaints of a stomach ache or feeling sick. So I guess as adults or people who are able to recognize their emotions, you might associate with that kind of feeling of dread in your stomach, or when your stomach's in knots, that kind of anxiety. So it often can be presented or reported as a stomach ache or feeling sick without a reason or an illness there. Mentally, it can look like increased anxiety, panic attacks, avoidance, aggression, being hyper emotional, so being tearful, crying, meltdowns. It can present in a whole host of ways. As I said, there's no one clear set of symptoms here. Each child's individual and presents completely differently. Often families will report that they have difficulty in the morning. So where the child or young person is reluctant to get ready, the journey to school might be difficult, there might be meltdowns, things like that. So that's also another common symptom, but may not apply with all. So that's a kind of very brief, very, very brief overview of school attendance issues, but hopefully gives a picture of what we're talking about, so we're all on the same page ahead of the questions on the next few slides. So here is question 1. So it says, my child is a school refuser. School aren't offering any help or support, but just keep issuing me with letters, threatening to fine me and or take me to court. Okay, so this sounds like a really tricky situation and additional stress that I'm guessing this parent or carer does not need in an already stressful situation. There are plenty of things you can do. First, you can arrange a meeting with the school if you haven't done this already, and this is often a really good starting point for most queries. So if you've watched all of the videos so far, you'll notice that's often my kind of first point of call. Meet with the school, have those conversations taking place. If you have done this already, but you feel maybe you haven't got anywhere, consider seeking support from an impartial service, so SENDIASS or something similar, and see if you can have another professional or an advocate in the meeting with you. So they're to support you, they're to maybe help with administrative things like taking minutes, things like that. Sometimes that can be a really helpful addition. Takes the pressure off you as well a little bit. So use this meeting, if you decide to take one, to discuss the difficulties that your child or young person may be experiencing. If you're aware of the potential triggers, discuss these. If your child has shared what those are, then absolutely share these. If you can get your child to kind of put into writing or draw a picture, or anything like that, something that communicates how they're feeling and what they're struggling with, that would be really helpful. But I realize that's not always possible, so that's just it. If you can, that's really helpful. So that's kind of the first thing to talk about. What triggers are there, if you've identified any? Might it be that your child's needs are unsupported or undiagnosed or unrecognized? So the school refusal is coming from somewhere. The anxiety is coming from somewhere. Is it anxiety around academic pressure that maybe hasn't been picked up? Is it anxiety around break times or using the toilet that hasn't been picked up or recognised? And that's of no fault of the school, because as we're all aware, some children with SEN can be brilliant at masking. So at school, there may not be a need that the school are aware of, but it doesn't mean it's not there. So that's one thing to think about as well. And I would ask as well, if that's in the back of your mind, if you're not sure if there's something else going on at school, ask the school to explore your child's SEN a bit more. If you've got an idea of where the areas of difficulty might be, just ask for them to look into it a bit more. That's their job, to keep assessing need and reviewing it and see where any new needs might crop up. Next, I'll be asking, or I've put this first on the list, but I'd be talking about SEN support. So is the child receiving SEN support? Are they on the SEN register first? But are they receiving support? If so, and they're still struggling to attend, might that support need reviewing, either adding to, increasing, or just changing completely? It might not be the right support anymore. Children's needs change all the time. So it might be that the provision that was in place, maybe it worked a month ago, it's not working anymore. So it's about that constant review. And what can the school do in terms of reasonable adjustments to support your child further? So if your child is struggling to attend, then what other adjustments can they make to the school day, to the demands, to support your child in attending? So whether that be it may be a slightly later or earlier start time to support them in that transition into school. It may be if they're not attending at all, it may be looking at a reintegration plan with a reduced timetable to gradually build up to full time. There's plenty of adjustments that can be made. So it's just about having that conversation. Beyond SEN support, have the school explored all options? So an EP referral, educational psychologist. Beyond that, have they thought about an EHC needs assessment request to further explore the child's needs and what provision they might require? So the second point, or option, I guess, is keep communication open with the school. Send daily updates if your child is off school for consecutive days. Document things your child shares with you, as I said, if they do, and share this with the school as well. Consider a home to school book to highlight anything that happens in the day that might be a potential trigger as well. And then you'll see I've put a quote here in the middle, which is from the school attendance guidance from the Department for Education. And this is around kind of coding absences. So where a child is not able to attend, or there's barriers to school attendance, as this parent has said, if we flip back to that question, the school are issuing with letters or threatening to fine. The reason the school may be doing this is because of the reduced attendance, because they do have a duty, once attendance drops below a certain point, to involve the Education Welfare Service, which I'll go on to explain a bit more in a second. But they do have a duty to report that and make sure that's monitored. However, if the absence or absences are due to an illness, which includes not just physical health, but also mental health, then the school can authorize these absences under the code for illness. So this quote here is taken from the school attendance guidance, and just says schools should advise parents to notify them on the first day the child is unable to attend due to illness. Schools should authorize absences due to illness unless they have genuine cause for concern about the veracity of an illness. If the authenticity of illness is in doubt, schools can request parents to provide medical evidence to support illness. So I won't read the rest there, I'll leave that for you to read in your own time, but that captures what we're about to talk about, which is the third point. So speaking with, if you haven't done already, speak with your GP and or CAMS, if your child is under CAMS, or a paediatrician if your child has a paediatrician. So if you can provide medical evidence of your child's difficulty accessing school due to their mental health, for example, anxiety or depression, then the school, as I said, can code these absences as authorised under illness. It is important here, I guess, to note that this is not a sick note. So I know some families or schools have referred to it as a sick note and then requested that from the GP, and that's been confused, been kind of lost in translation, if you like. So it's not a sick note. It's medical evidence can be in the form of, as it says in the guidance here, prescriptions, appointment cards, etc., rather than doctor's notes. But it may be helpful if you have an appointment with the GP for them to write a letter for you. Some GPs will do this, just to say, Jimmy had an appointment on blah, 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 blah. And maybe if they're referring them on to CAMS or something, they could just explain what their observations are or what their suggestions are. So it might be that I predict that Jimmy's difficulty accessing school may be due to anxiety. So even if it's not definitive, something like that can be helpful in terms of evidence. But as it does say in that guidance, unless there's genuine cause for concern around the veracity, so the truthfulness of that illness, the schools shouldn't really be requesting medical evidence as absolutely mandatory. However, that does happen. So it's just something to think about, just to ensure you've got that evidence. It's going to help you in the long run, definitely. So finally, if you are being threatened with an attendance order, so what this parent's talking about, fines, attendance order, etc., you can write to the Education Welfare Service to explain your child's SEM and the specific barriers to school attendance. I think it's best to explain that school attendance or reduced attendance, sorry, is due to their mental health. So really emphasize that it's their mental health. It's not deliberate truancy. It's not them being deliberately defiant. It's a genuine health reason, a genuine illness. And you can ask the Education Welfare Service. At this point, you should have a allocated education welfare officer, so you can ask them for coordinated support to increase your child's attendance. So they are there to work with you, not against you. It's not, although they're often used as a threat, they are there to work with you and the school. It should be collaborative. So it's worth at this point referring back to the school's legal duty to use their best endeavours to support your child in this case, particularly as this parent or carer has said that the school are not offering any help or support. So refer the school to this legal duty using the legislation, so you can see it on this slide here, and ask them what reasonable adjustments, so again you can see the reference here, the school are making to support your child in reintegrating back into school. This may involve including a specialist service, so the EP service or CAMS. So are the school using all resources available to them to support your child, making those reasonable adjustments? The school's duty to educate still remains, and this can be provided through work being sent home during periods of absence. As soon as it becomes clear, and this is the final point on this slide, as soon as it becomes clear that your child or young person is likely to be away from school for 15 days or more, and that's not just consecutively, that's kind of cumulatively, as soon as it becomes clear, the school should inform the local authority, and the local authority should then arrange alternative provision, so full-time educational provision. This should be by the 6th day of absence at the very latest, and that duty is included in section 19 of the Education Act. So this applies whether your child has any HCP or does not. So really important point here, and I think this can often be a tricky one to get in place, and it comes down to whether the school are communicating with the local authority or not. So make sure that that conversation is taking place. You could also contact the local authority, the SEN team, to make them aware of the absences and the difficulties you're having, and you can discuss this provision of alternative education as well. If your child does have any HCP, consider requesting an early annual review. It may be that your child's needs have changed and they need additional different support. So you can ask for an early annual review to review this. You can also ask for a reassessment of need if your child's needs have changed drastically, and that may be appropriate if, for example, their mental health needs have declined significantly, maybe if they did not have mental health needs previously and now they do. So that would be a useful avenue to take. So we'll look at question 2 now. So question 2, it says, what power does an attendance officer or education welfare officer, so EWO I'll refer to, what power do they have? What are their roles? And can I contact them myself? So a few questions in there. So we'll start by looking at the Education Welfare Service as a whole, so that team. So they are a team who work with schools, professionals and families to support increased attendance. They work within the local authority and they offer a specialist social work service. So that's the service itself. The Education Welfare Officer or Attendance Officer therefore carries out that specialist social work to support this goal. So this includes kind of home visits, family visits, getting to know the family, coordinating meetings with relevant professionals, so any professionals involved, and supporting a coordinated plan to increase that attendance. So their role is, as I said, it's specialist social work. And as I said in the previous slide, they're not there to work against you, they're there to work with you, absolutely. So typically, schools will have a link EWO or Education Welfare Officer and will refer families or the child to them when attendance becomes an issue. And that's typically when attendance drops below a certain percentage, which I'm not 100% sure of, I'm afraid. But at that point, the school will refer the family to the EWO. If this happens, as I said, they are there to support you. Don't panic. They should not be used as a threat. They are honestly there to support you. Their job is to support you in increasing that attendance. Families will have the contact details of their officer, the EWO officer, and can absolutely contact them. So once you are referred, you should receive information. You should get a letter, I believe, from the team explaining who your attendance officer is with their contact details, and you can absolutely maintain communication with them. The Education Welfare Service itself can be contacted by telephone, and I believe, hopefully I've put their number on the next slide. So we'll get to that in a second. So in terms of what power the EWO has, they can take legal action if after their involvement, the child's attendance does not improve. So this is under the Education Act, this kind of legal right to take action, and can be used to ensure that the child returns to school if they're not in school. So outcomes of this include a fine, a parenting order, which might be parenting classes, education supervision order, which is where a supervisor is appointed to help get the child to school if you're not cooperating, or a school attendance order when the child is given a school that they must attend. Now, all these sound quite extreme and a little bit scary, but will mostly come into play if there's not a genuine reason for the child missing education, and if you as a family or parent carer have been uncooperative. So it should not lead to these outcomes if you're cooperative and if there's a genuine reason which you can evidence. So if this is a case of genuine school refusal related to mental health need, the above outcomes are not likely to happen, and the Education Welfare Officer's work will be around supporting a reintegration plan rather than threatening you with fines, etc. So there we go. Whew, I did put the contact details there. So as I said, there's a link EWO with the Southampton schools, there should be. And here are the contact details here. So their phone number, the website, and also another website from the local offer with a bit more information as well. Okay, So before we finish, I just wanted to pull together some tips from an organisation called Not Fine in School. So I kind of trawled through their website and pulled together some key tips that I think are really useful here. So the first one, when reporting an absence, use the phrase, "My child is too unwell to attend," rather than "I can't get him in today," or "he won't come in today." And the reasoning for this, and this is explained on their website, which you can have a look at in a second, is that it then ensures that the reason you give is related to their health needs, to their illness, which is a mental health difficulty. And it's not a case of defiance or refusal in that negative sense. So that's one useful tip to use when reporting your absence. The second point was keep a paper trail of communication with school and professionals. Now, I think this is key in any case or query you have. A paper trail of that communication is very useful, so that if you ever need to refer to something, it's there and it's ready. You can't refer to a telephone conversation or a verbal conversation in the playground. So even if you have key conversations verbally on the phone or in the playground, I always say to parents, follow it up with an email to that professional. Just say, "Thank you for our conversation earlier," on the phone, in the playground, whatever, just to confirm this is what was discussed and this is what was agreed. If you have any issues, please do let me know, or something like that. That way it's just documented what was said, what was agreed, and there's no disputing that. Especially if you give the option for that professional to correct you if anything's not been presented correctly. So that's a really useful point in any case, not just school refusal. The third one is keep a brief daily diary. So this is useful, again, in any situation of refusal or where there are needs that potentially aren't being met. So from a parent perspective or carer perspective, what does that day look like at home? So if they have been at school, the morning, what was that like? What things were said? What happened? When did the anxiety start? What did that look like? In the evening, so after school, again, how did the child present after school? Were they calm? Were they fine? Or did they explode? Did it all become too much and there were meltdowns? There was, everything like that. So keep a diary. You can also ask, as we talked about in the previous slide, for a home to school diary to be put in place, and that will give key information about the school day. So even if it seems kind of very simple or arbitrary, there might be a tiny event that triggered a huge bout of anxiety, and I know from parents I've worked with, sometimes it can be something really small, just an odd comment that maybe the child interpreted in a different way, and that sparked off weeks of school refusal. So those little interactions are so important. So if you can get a home to school diary in place, that's really useful. It can help you better understand what the school day looks like. The point 4, really important point, seek medical evidence. As soon as there is any refusal or signs of refusal, speak with your GP, paediatrician, CAMS. Ultimately, this will protect you from prosecution, hopefully, if you can provide that medical evidence. So that kind of answers that first question. And then finally, refer to the school's policies on SEND and attendance. So the school will have policies on both of those things. They should be available on their website. So refer to those. Ensure that the school are following those policies in both of those areas. If they're not, question the school, refer to their own policies. Okay, so now I've provided some links here, key links, things we've discussed and I've referenced, and some other additional ones. So a mixture of legislation, guidance and fact sheets as well, and also web links, so lots here for you. So the first 2 you should be familiar with by now. So the Children and Families Act, Best Endeavours Duty. Are the school using their best endeavours to support your child in attending school? Second one, Equality Act. Are the school making reasonable adjustments to support your child in attending school? So really key pieces there. And then the third one is that duty on the local authority to provide alternative educational provision. So that's when it looks like your child might be out of school for 15 days or more. So that's where the duty is contained within that legislation there. So next is a guidance document from the Department for Education on ensuring education for pupils with health needs. So that's a really useful guidance document talking about what kind of education should be put in place. Then we have the SENDIASS parent training recorded webinar on school refusal and anxiety, which I mentioned at the very beginning now. So it goes into more depth in some areas and gives some information that I might not have explored fully. So do check it out if you do want to kind of explore some of those areas a bit more. They may well be in that presentation. Next, we have the Not Fine in School website, which is, as I said, a brilliant website with resources for both families and professionals. The next link underneath it is also from Not Fine in School, and it's a resource specifically for professionals. So it looks like it can be shared with schools. The language is certainly geared towards that. So if you're having difficulty communicating your child's absences, or if the school are not acknowledging that those absences are coming from a genuine place of illness, then perhaps you could use this resource to help explain and support your explanation of where the refusal is coming from. So that's a really good resource to have a look at and share with schools. And then the final link is really interesting, actually. So I came across this on the Not Fine in School website. So it discusses recent clarification from the Department for Education around levels of flexibility in the provision of medical evidence. So ultimately it emphasises that if there is not a genuine reason for doubting the child's medical need, then the school or the local authority should not be pressuring families for medical evidence. So I know I've stressed medical evidence as being really key, but actually what the Department for Education is saying is if there is not a genuine need to doubt the medical need, then there should not be a pressure to provide it. So that's coming from the Department for Education, and do use that if you're in that situation and if you're struggling to obtain medical evidence. However, as I've said before, obtaining that medical evidence is still key and is really useful for building a more in-depth picture of your child's needs and what difficulties they might have. So that brings us to the end of part 3 of the Reminds and SENDIASS Q&A series, all about school refusal. So thank you for watching, and the next part is on exclusions. So it also includes a little bit about reduced timetables, which come under exclusions, and you'll see why if you watch the next part. But yeah, otherwise, thank you for watching and take care. Hopefully see you in part 4.